Hi guys, so it's that time of the year where you typically start thinking about colleges, and especially if you plan on studying in Canada. You're bound to have like a million questions because after all, it is a very big decision. There are courses that can absolutely make your life, and in all honesty, there are also courses that can be an absolute waste of your time and money, which is something you'll definitely want to avoid. And that's what we're talking about today, the courses to study in Canada, what to keep in mind, and how to decide on which course to study. With that, I'm Ashika and let's dive in. For starters, I think there are a bunch of questions you need to ask yourself. The most important being, is Canada the best place for me to study? And a lot of factors go into answering this question. Does it have the best classes when it comes to this particular course that I'm considering? How does it stack up in comparison to other countries like the US, UK, Germany, Australia, right? And will studying this course in Canada drastically improve your chances of landing a job? And most importantly, are you studying in Canada because you want a job in Canada once you're done with your course? Or because you want to experience life in Canada? Or because the best classes of this particular course are offered in Canada versus any other country? Now, if the answer is that you want to study in Canada simply because they offer the best course and you don't really care about landing a job, by all means, go right ahead and sign up. But if, like the vast majority, you plan on getting a job in Canada once you're done with your course, in that case, you need to be very, very careful in planning how to go ahead. A lot of students make a massive mistake while picking a course by blindly listening to somebody else's advice. And it could be a student or a friend of yours or an alumni, because what necessarily worked for them will not necessarily work for you. You need to figure out what course helps you take a step closer towards what you want in your life. Another mistake is listening to agents and counselors without doing your own research. Guaranteed they might know more than you do, but that isn't necessarily enough. You need to do your own research, which is basically contacting alumni, contacting the college, reading reviews, watching videos on it, doing all the possible research that you can. The reason I say this is you've probably seen the news of how unreliable agents can be when it came to the entire scam that involved agents sending Indian students to Canada to study only to find out that it was all fake, right? And that isn't the only bad example. Very often, agents, for their own personal ulterior motives, push you towards certain courses or universities, irrespective of whether that's the best option for you. Now, let's break down what kind of courses you should be avoiding in Canada. And this is especially if you want to land a job. For starters, avoid any course that isn't related to your previous experience or your previous study. And there are multiple reasons. Take my case. If I were to apply for a machine learning course after I did my Bachelor of Commerce. Now, the first challenge over here is there's a very high likelihood that your visa will be rejected because in all honesty, it genuinely looks like you're just doing this course so that you can get into the country and not because you actually wanted to study. And apart from that, how is this course going to help you? If you take my example, I would have no background in software, and it's not like my accounting knowledge is going to help me in any way when it came to machine learning, right? And so apart from the fact that I'd probably be terrible at my course, the bigger question is, who's going to hire me? One look at my CV and it would be very obvious that I'm more confused than anything else. And I don't really think confused is the look hirers or recruiters are going for, right? Now, the second type of courses that you should avoid are the courses that look really interesting and fun, but in theory have really no practical application and will not help you land a job. Think about it. Most of us watching this video come from developing countries, so there's a very high likelihood that we will never opt for jobs like paleontology, archaeology, philosophy, history, theatre, arts. Just not for us. And the reason is simple. Unfortunately, this is how it is, but these roles will not help us land jobs in our home countries. So unless you're absolutely driven by T-Rexes and eat, sleep and breathe dinosaurs, these courses really don't make sense for us. A lot of Western countries do have courses though in subjects like archaeology, paleontology, and anthropology, and a lot of people work in these fields as well. But understand this, that if this is the career you want, you need to keep two things in mind. Canada might not be the best place for these courses, and because that you might not end up with a job. And the second thing is you'll have to be prepared to work really, really hard. You can be an average marketing specialist and still land a job, but if you're an average archaeologist or a paleontologist, I don't think that's going to cut it. There are limited jobs in these fields, so if you do enter these fields, you'll have to be really, really good at what you do. So you might want to avoid it. The other thing you need to keep in mind is longevity of the courses that you're doing. What I mean by this is picking courses in trending topics which are trending now but might not necessarily be actually in practice or trending 10 years down the line. For instance, AI is trending, but if you think about it, AI is probably going to be shaping the future. So if you do want to do a course in AI and machine learning, that's probably a really smart bet. But doing a course on NFTs, on the other hand, not the right answer. So keep this in mind that the course you pick, whichever course it is, needs to be relevant for at least the next 10 years. Beyond that, no one knows, but at least for 10 years. The next course you want to avoid, or the type of courses you want to avoid, are teaching courses, because here's the thing. Teaching roles are difficult to come by. And beyond that, after spending a considerable amount on studying and getting trained in this, the pay for these jobs is often very low. So the question you need to be asking yourself is the return on investment going to be good enough if you take a teaching course? Because the return on investment over here is the money you've put in. Will you be able to recover it and actually make more out of it, right? And this is especially the case with language courses because, well, they're very often shorter in nature. And the challenge with language courses, you very often do not get a post-study work permit because of these courses. So if I were you, I would avoid them in all honesty. And something you probably don't know is that especially if you study English as a second language or French as a second language, you definitely don't get a post-study permit. So that's something you should keep in mind. But here's the thing. It's always great to be bilingual. For sales, for instance, a sales manager who's bilingual is always highly coveted versus somebody who can speak only one language, because then you can speak to clients all over the world. But this would be your secondary skill set and not your primary skill set. So studying another language always helps, but that shouldn't be your main primary goal. Now, the same goes for any short-term training course. Apart from being a study program at a designated learning institution that gives you a diploma, a degree, or a certificate, the course needs to be at least 8 months long. And that is if you want to get a post-study work permit in Canada. So any course that is 6 weeks long or 6 months long is pretty pointless if you ask me, if you want to live in Canada beyond this, because you won't get a post-work permit. And then you can't live in Canada. So how will you find a job? Next is the courses that make absolutely no sense. Typically, all the visa officials see right through it and you don't get a visa. So I've done a bachelor's in commerce and I've done an MBA after that. So if I apply to do another MBA, that would be rather pointless, wouldn't it? However, if I applied for a fellowship program or if I applied for a course in MarTech along with AI-driven marketing, that would make sense and I probably would get accepted as well. Do you get what I mean? If you plan on studying something in Canada that you've already studied, apart from the challenges with your visa, you're honestly wasting your time and money because you're not adding anything additional to your portfolio, right? Then there's also a bunch of jobs in Canada where after you've completed your course, you then have to take a certification or get a license to actually start practicing your job. These are called regulated roles. So basically, after you finish your diploma, you then need to get a certificate or a license stating that you're allowed to practice this role or this job wherever it is. And the license or regulation that you need to get depends on which province you plan on practicing in, which also means that if you decide to switch provinces at any point, you'll probably have to get a different set of certificates or licenses then. Now, some of these regulated roles are healthcare roles, law roles, accounting roles, and a lot of other roles which basically account for 20% of all of the courses in Canada. So while picking a course, it's really important for you to check whether it's a regulated role or not before you start your course. So the challenge really is that you'll have to spend additional time and money on getting these licenses or certificates. And apart from that, after you've finished your course, you'll have to wait even longer to actually get these certificates before you can actually start earning. So that's one more hurdle. Now, the next course that you should be slightly wary of is the courses that are extremely popular in Canada and courses that everyone is doing. The simple reason is that there are going to be more people who are actually qualified to do this job and less jobs than actually are required. So there's going to be a lot of competition for that role simply because all of you have done the same course. And this includes roles like project management, business management, because they're so common and they're usually general subjects. And I actually read an article a couple of days ago which said that at this point in Canada, there are more people that are qualified with university degrees that are unemployed than people without degrees. And most of the jobs that are coming up and have vacancies for longer periods of time are jobs which don't require the university degree. So now you have the same problem that you have too many qualified people, and if all of you are qualified in the same area, it's going to be extremely challenging to find a job. And I'm not saying don't do this course. Of course, if you love management, you want a management role, absolutely go for it. But couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, make sure that the university and the course that you actually pick are absolutely great. And the second job is you have to do a bang up job of it and be brilliant at this course if you want a job. If you don't expect to be brilliant, consider something else. And do remember that if you do start the course and through the length of the course you realize it's not working for you, you're not interested, or you just find it too challenging, you find it not challenging at all, you can always consider switching to a different course, and all you have to do is speak to your university about this. Alrighty, now let's talk about what you should do instead. First off, figure out which roles are actually facing a shortage of workers in Canada. Just some of the jobs which are in demand in Canada are those of key sales account managers, registered nurses, software developers, and marketing managers, amongst others. What you need to do is some amount of basic research for the role or the sector that you're interested in and see which roles are facing a shortage or which roles have the most number of openings. That will give you a really good starting point. It's going to give you an idea of how easy or how difficult it will be for you to get that job once you're done with your course. And if you don't know where to start, check Job Bank. For instance, if you check Digital Marketing Manager, you'll see 331 results. But if you look, Marketing Manager will throw up 180 results. So you have a good idea of what roles you should pick then. The next thing you should do is check which provinces have shortages for specific roles. And this is all the more important, especially if you have specific requirements about which province you want to work in once you're done with your course. And that might be based on the weather, it might be based on where you have friends and family living, or it just might be based on where you think you have better job opportunities available. The next thing you need to remember is just because this job is extremely popular in whichever country you originally belong to or are in now, it doesn't necessarily mean that this role will also be popular and help generate jobs in Canada. For instance, if you belong to Norway, you'll obviously know that there are a lot of job openings available for oil and gas engineers. But that might not necessarily be the case in Canada. So that's something you have to keep in mind. The next thing you have to do is ensure that the course that you consider studying offers a PGWP by checking with your university before you start this course. And finally, before you go ahead, do check if the college that you're interested in is DLR approved by the Canadian government. Now, that being said, I'm guessing the ultimate aim for most of you watching this video is to settle down in Canada. And if you'd like to know more options on how you can immigrate, watch this.